My name is Victoria. I'm 34 years old. And last month my boss looked me straight in the eye and told me a woman could never be a chief pilot. I thought it was just another comment, until I found out what he had secretly done behind my back. That moment changed everything for me. Where are you watching from? Comment your state below and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about courage, justice, and everyday battles we all face. I still remember the exact sound of the office door clicking shut behind me. It was soft, almost gentle, but it carried a weight that made my heartbeat quicken. I'd stepped into that doorway a dozen times before, but that morning felt different. My palms were damp. My uniform collar felt tighter than usual. And for reasons I couldn't explain at that moment, something deep inside me whispered that I was walking straight into a moment that would change my life. My boss, Captain Richard Hayes, sat behind his wooden desk, tapping the end of a pen against a stack of papers as if the rhythm helped him think clearer. He didn't look up at first. He just kept tapping, 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 slow, deliberate, and almost taunting. The blinds behind him were half open, letting in a thin stream of morning light that cut across his desk and cast long shadows down the wall. The whole office smelled faintly of old coffee and stale air conditioning. It was an ordinary Midwest regional airport office, nothing fancy, nothing impressive. Yet everything about it suddenly felt intimidating. "Victoria," he finally said, lifting his eyes. "Have a seat." His tone wasn't harsh, just cold and businesslike. I sat across from him, folding my hands to hide the nervous twitch in my fingers. I had spent years working hard, building flight hours, studying procedures until late at night, proving myself on every single route. I wasn't expecting a celebration, but I certainly wasn't expecting what came next. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly through his nose. "I reviewed your application," he said, "for the chief pilot position." My heart lifted for a moment. I had poured everything into that application. Experience, certifications, spotless flight record, it was all there. Then he continued. "And I'm going to make this simple." The tapping pen suddenly stopped. "A woman cannot be a chief pilot, Victoria. Not here. Not under my leadership." The words hit me like a sudden drop in altitude. A sharp, weightless shock that left me breathless for a second. I stared at him, unsure if I'd heard him correctly. His face was expressionless, as if he'd just delivered a weather update instead of crushing years of work with one sentence. I swallowed, trying to ground myself. "Captain Hayes, I've met every requirement. My record is clean. My evaluations." He raised a hand, cutting me off. "You're a good pilot. No one's questioning that." His voice softened, but the softness felt insulting. "But the chief pilot role? That requires a certain kind of authority, a presence. Our crews respond better to, well, someone who fits the traditional image." I felt my nails press into my palms. "Traditional image?" I asked quietly. He shrugged. "A man." The room went silent. Even the air conditioner seemed to pause, as if the whole world held its breath with me. I kept telling myself not to cry, not to show anything, not to give him the reaction he wanted. I felt heat rise in my chest, not anger yet. Something heavier, something deeply personal. A quiet kind of pain reserved for moments when someone looks at you and decides your worth before you say a single word. "Is that all?" I finally asked. He closed the file with a soft thud. "That's all." I stood slowly, afraid my legs might shake if I moved too fast. My uniform suddenly felt too heavy, like the fabric itself was disappointed in me. I didn't trust my voice enough to say anything else, so I simply walked out of the room. The door clicked again behind me, the same soft sound as before, but this time it felt like a final verdict. The hallway outside the office was empty. The smell of jet fuel drifted in from the runway, something that had always comforted me. Not today. Today it smelled like a dream slipping away. I made my way to the break room, a tiny space squeezed between a supply closet and dispatch. Inside, the old coffee machine hummed, filling the room with a bitter scent. I sat at the small round table and stared at the dark surface for a minute. My throat tightened. I blinked hard, refusing to let the tears come. I'd worked since I was 17 years old. I paid for flight school doing overnight shifts at a gas station. I lived in a cramped studio apartment for years while building hours in old single-engine planes. My family back in Kansas had cheered for every milestone. My father used to say, You were born to fly, Vic. He'd smile proudly, and I believed him every time. And now one man, one boss, had the power to sit behind a desk and declare that my dreams didn't fit the picture he had in his mind. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. And it wasn't something I wanted to accept quietly. Still, I stayed in that break room longer than I should have, trying to steady my breathing. A few coworkers walked by the door, but I kept my eyes down, pretending to scroll through my phone so no one would see the storm inside me. Then a small moment happened. One that didn't seem important at the time, but later became part of what pushed me forward. Our senior mechanic, Doug, walked in grabbing a water bottle from the fridge. He glanced at me. "You good, Vic?" I forced a small smile. "Yeah, just tired." He nodded slowly. "You look like someone who just got told something they didn't deserve." My smile faltered. I looked away, unsure how he saw through me so quickly. Doug wasn't someone I talked to often, just exchanged quick greetings during pre-flights. But he had been at the airport longer than anyone else. He'd seen things. He'd survived things. He set the bottle down and sat across from me. "Hayes give you trouble?" I stiffened. "Why would you ask that?" Doug shrugged, resting his arms on the table. "Kid, I've worked here 30 years. I can tell when someone's been in that office and walked out with something heavy on their shoulders." I didn't answer, but my silence was answer enough. He sighed. "You're good, you know. One of the best pilots here. Don't let him make you forget that." His tone wasn't grand or dramatic. It was simple, like he was stating the weather. But it meant more than he realized. It reminded me that not everyone saw me the way Hayes did. It reminded me I wasn't invisible. After he left, I sat for a long moment, letting his words settle. And when I finally stood, something inside me had shifted. Not fully, not dramatically, but enough. Enough to walk out of that room with a steady pace. Enough to lift my chin. Enough to whisper a promise inside my own head. He might have tried to clip my wings today, but I will fly higher than he ever imagined. That quiet vow became the spark, the beginning of a journey I didn't know I had the strength to take. But that day, that ordinary morning in a small airport office, became the moment everything changed. He tried to stop my wings. He had no idea I was just getting ready to take off. When I walked out of that break room with my quiet promise still echoing inside me, I expected the day to slowly return to normal. I thought I would settle back into routine, finish my pre-flight checks, greet the passengers and push forward. But the moment I stepped into the main hallway leading toward the hangar, a strange stillness hung in the air, like the kind you feel before a storm begins. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud, just a heaviness that made me tighten my grip on my flight binder and keep my eyes forward. I didn't want anyone reading my face. I didn't want to give away the battle I just had to fight in silence. When I reached my aircraft, the first familiar voice I heard was from Mark, one of the younger co-pilots. "Morning, Vic," he said, leaning against the wheel chock. His grin was easy as always, but then his eyes narrowed slightly. "You okay? You look off." I shook my head lightly. "I'm fine. Just didn't sleep well." He accepted the answer without pushing. That was something I always appreciated about him. Some people asked to be nosy. Mark asked because he cared, but he knew when to back away. Still, I caught him glancing at me again as I started my inspection, as if trying to figure out whether something had happened and if he should step in. I gave him a small nod to ease his concern, and he returned it with a slow one of his own. It wasn't until I boarded the plane and closed the cockpit door behind me that I finally exhaled. The familiar beeps, switches, and hums around me offered a comfort nothing else could give. I strapped in, took a breath, and let the seat hold some of the weight I'd been carrying since the meeting with Hayes. For those few moments, surrounded by the gentle sounds of the aircraft, I felt like myself again. But the peace didn't last long. Later that afternoon, when I returned to the operations room to review the next day's assignments, something on the board caught my attention. My name had been moved from the flight I'd originally been scheduled for, a route I had requested specifically because it added hours I needed for my qualification log. Instead, my name had been placed on a shorter, less valuable leg. A quiet substitution, the kind that wouldn't be explained unless someone dared to ask. I stood there staring at it for a moment, gripping the strap of my bag a little tighter. I hadn't expected retaliation so quickly. Not openly, not publicly, but subtle moves. Quiet shifts in schedules? Those were the kinds of games people like Hayes knew how to play without leaving fingerprints. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I didn't trust myself to speak calmly. Instead, I turned and walked toward the vestibule that overlooked the runway. The sun was dipping low, painting the horizon in a soft orange glow. A plane in the distance lifted into the sky, leaving a pale trail behind it. I watched it until it disappeared, reminding myself what I was fighting for. That evening after clocking out, I stopped by the vending machine near the staff exit, fishing for loose change in my pocket. The machine buzzed as I pressed the buttons, and before my snack even dropped, I heard footsteps approaching. It was Sarah, one of the dispatchers I'd grown friendly with over the years. She leaned her shoulder against the wall, her curly hair pulled into a messy bun. "Long day?" she asked. I gave a tired smile. "You could say that." She raised an eyebrow. "Saw your name move on the schedule. That wasn't an accident." I didn't respond right away. I didn't have to, because she already understood what I had been too afraid to say aloud. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. This was part of something bigger. "I don't think he wants you climbing any higher," she said gently. I swallowed. "I'm starting to see that." She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "You know, you're not the first one he's done this to." My head turned sharp toward her. "What do you mean?" She took a soft breath. "He's blocked others before. Not for the same reason, but for reasons just as unfair." She glanced around, making sure no one else was near. "I've been here long enough to notice things. He doesn't like being questioned. He doesn't like being proven wrong. And he definitely doesn't like strong pilots who don't need him to validate their worth." A quiet shiver ran through me. Not fear but recognition. An understanding that the path ahead wasn't just steep. It was lined with obstacles he had carefully placed over time. Sarah touched my elbow lightly. "Just be careful. He plays subtle. And he plays long." I thanked her and walked out to the parking lot, where the evening air was cooler, the sky now shifting into deep blue. As I approached my car, I kept replaying her words. I tried to push away the tension, but it settled in my shoulders, refusing to loosen. When I finally sat behind the wheel, the silence of the car allowed all the thoughts I had been avoiding to surface. I rested my hands on the steering wheel and closed my eyes. Images flashed through my mind. Hayes' expression, the schedule board, Sarah's warning. The weight of everything pressed against me. But beneath all of that, something else flickered. Determination. Not loud. Not explosive. Just steady. The next morning I arrived earlier than usual. The sky was still gray, the first hint of sunrise barely lighting the horizon. I liked the stillness of that hour. There were fewer people around and the quiet gave me space to think. I walked toward the training room to review some materials on my own time. If he was going to make things harder, then I would become sharper, stronger, better. When I reached the door, I found someone already inside. Jenna, one of the newer trainees, barely a few months into her position. She was sitting at the long table with her training textbook open, highlighter cap tucked between her teeth. When she saw me, she sat up straighter. "Oh, morning, Captain Blake," she said nervously. "I didn't think anyone came this early." I smiled gently. "Just call me Victoria." I set my things down across from her. "You're here before sunrise. That's dedication." She laughed softly. I want to do well. I want to be good at this." I nodded. "You will be." She hesitated before speaking again. "Can I ask something?" "Of course." "Did something happen with Captain Hayes yesterday?" My body froze for half a second, though I tried not to show it. "Why do you ask?" She fidgeted with her highlighter cap. "I heard something when I passed his office. I didn't mean to listen, but the door wasn't fully closed. I heard him say something about image and not getting the wrong expectations. I wasn't sure what it meant, but it sounded like he was talking about you." I swallowed gently, keeping my voice calm. "I see." Jenna looked at me with wide, earnest eyes. "I'm sorry if I overstepped. You're someone I look up to. And it didn't sound fair." Her sincerity hit me in a place that had been bruised since yesterday. I took a breath, choosing my next words with care. "Thank you for telling me. It means more than you realize." She nodded quickly, relieved. "I just hope things work out. You deserve good things here." As she returned to her studying, I watched her quietly for a moment. She reminded me of myself when I first started, hopeful, hardworking, unaware of the quiet battles waiting behind closed doors. I wondered how many times she would have to fight her own silent struggles before someone noticed. The rest of the morning passed with tiny moments that added to the tension I felt. Small remarks from coworkers that seemed oddly cautious, passing glances I wasn't used to, and a message on my phone asking me to stop by Hayes' office later in the afternoon. That request sat with me all day like a stone in my pocket. But the subtle battles didn't always come from the people you expected. Later that afternoon, while inspecting the aircraft before another flight, I noticed someone had double-checked my walk-around section but failed to initial their work. A small oversight, technically harmless but one that crew members rarely forgot. It made me wonder whether someone had been instructed to keep a closer eye on me, or whether someone felt uncertain about working under me if Hayes openly disapproved. I didn't confront them. Not then. I chose instead to complete my checks carefully, documenting everything as usual, refusing to let the small disruptions distract me. But they did. They piled up quietly, like pebbles collecting inside my shoes. Tiny, uncomfortable reminders that the environment around me was shifting in ways I couldn't always see. The turning point of that day came unexpectedly during a short refueling stop. I was walking toward the terminal when I heard someone call my name. It was the older mechanic, Doug, wiping his hands on a rag as he walked toward me. He gestured for me to join him near the side of the hangar where the noise from the tarmac was quieter. He studied my face for a few seconds. Rough day. I gave a tired chuckle. Something like that. He nodded, leaning against a stack of crates. You know, subtle battles can be worse than open ones. At least when someone is loud, you know where the fight is. He paused, his eyes sharpening. But the quiet ones? Those can wear you down if you're not prepared. I leaned against the wall beside him. I'm starting to see that. He folded his arms. Just remember, no good pilot ever panicked in light turbulence. You hold the controls. You fly the plane. You keep steady no matter what's happening outside. His words were simple, but they anchored me in a way I desperately needed. A few moments later, he pushed off the crates and nodded goodbye. Hang in there, Vic. That evening, when I finished my final route, I felt a quiet exhaustion. Not from flying, but from navigating the small, invisible battles that filled the spaces between every task. None of them were big enough to make a scene. None dramatic enough to complain about. But together they formed a pattern I could no longer ignore. When I walked out through the terminal doors, the sky had turned a deep purple, a few stars beginning to peek through. The air was cool enough to raise goosebumps along my arms. I crossed the parking lot slowly, letting the day settle into my mind. Every subtle shift, every cautious stare, every quiet move on the schedule. It all added up to a truth I hadn't spoken aloud yet. He wasn't just trying to block a promotion. He was trying to break my confidence piece by piece, hoping I'd eventually convince myself to step back. But as I reached my car and rested my hand on the door handle, I felt something inside me straighten. Not anger. Something steadier. Something that wasn't going to crumble under the weight of quiet pressure. I wasn't stepping back. Not now. Not ever. And as I sat in the silence of my car again, just like the night before, I knew one thing for certain. He had underestimated me. These subtle battles? They were only making me stronger. When I walked out of that break room after wiping those tears from my cheeks, something inside me felt strangely awake. I didn't feel powerful yet, but I felt steadier. It was like I had finally stepped out of the fog he kept me in. That small crack of confidence from the flight instructor's quiet support earlier gave me just enough courage to keep moving forward. And as I headed toward my locker, I realized something important. Marcus had always counted on my silence. He thought if he cornered me privately and spoke with that cold authority in his voice, I would shrink back and give up. But he didn't expect me to watch him. He didn't expect me to listen carefully. And he certainly didn't expect me to collect anything that could prove he was never telling the truth. I just didn't know how to collect it yet. All I had was this new determination shaking inside me like a nervous heartbeat. As soon as I grabbed my bag, I noticed one of the older flight attendants, Judy, giving me a long look from across the hallway. She was in her late 50s, gentle smile, brown hair tied back. One of those people who always made others feel safe. She stepped closer, lowering her voice the way women do when they sense another woman's been through something. "You all right, sweetheart?" she asked. I froze for a moment. I didn't want anyone knowing how I'd been treated. But the sincerity in her eyes made me answer honestly. "I will be. I just need some clarity," I said quietly. She nodded like she understood without needing details. "Well, if you ever need someone to talk to, someone who's seen a few things, you come find me." That small kindness warmed me more than she knew. But I didn't have time to lean on anyone emotionally. I needed something stronger than support. I needed proof. A hint I didn't expect. Later that evening I returned home, dropped my bag on the rug, and sat at my small dining table with a notebook. Every word Marcus had said in the past few months suddenly replayed in my head. Certain phrases, certain looks, certain patterns. I jotted everything down, not knowing if any of it mattered yet. Halfway through writing, my phone buzzed. It was a message from a younger pilot named Ben. "Hey, just checking in. Saw you leave earlier. Everything okay?" I stared at the message for a long moment. Ben wasn't close to me, but he had always been polite. Always respectful. Maybe he sensed something was off today. Maybe everyone did except the person causing the harm. I typed slowly. "Thanks, I'm alright. Just dealing with some things at work." He replied almost immediately. "If it's about the chief pilot position, rumor is someone messed with the process." My heart stopped for a second. I blinked at the screen, reading the words over again. Messed with the process. I felt a surge of coldness travel down my arms. I typed, "What do you mean?" He wrote, "Not sure. Just overheard ops saying paperwork was changed. But I don't know the details. Don't want to say more unless I'm certain. Paperwork was changed." I leaned back against my chair. I had suspected Marcus was blocking my application out of bias, but this was different. This meant something deeper. Something deliberate. Something that could be proven. I messaged him one more time. "Thank you. Don't say more unless you feel comfortable. But what you just told me, that was important." He simply responded, "Take care, Victoria." The world felt louder than before. My heartbeat felt louder too. If paperwork had been altered, someone had touched official documents. And documents always left trails. I tapped my fingers on the table, thinking carefully. I remembered that after every application process, there was an electronic record that could be accessed, if you knew where to look. Not the public-facing portal, but the archived log in the system used by internal staff. I didn't have access to the deeper part of that system, but I knew someone who did. The person who didn't speak much. The next morning I went to the hangar early. The sun was barely rising, casting long shadows across the tarmac. In the small technology office near the corner of the building sat a quiet woman named Clara. She handled internal databases, maintenance scheduling software, and all sorts of digital systems that pilots rarely understood. She wasn't a talker. She liked her headphones, her tea, and her peace. But she respected fairness. She always had. I knocked gently on her door frame. She looked up slowly, removed one headphone, and raised her eyebrows like she already sensed something unusual. "Morning," I said softly. "Morning," she replied. I stepped into her office. "I need help. And I'm not even sure how to ask without getting you in trouble." She straightened a bit in her chair. "What kind of help?" "I applied for the chief pilot position," I said, voice steady but small. "I was told I wasn't qualified. But someone hinted the paperwork was changed. And I'm trying to understand what really happened." Clara set her tea down carefully. "That's a serious claim, Victoria." "I know. I wouldn't be here if I didn't feel like something was truly wrong." She studied me for a long moment. Her eyes weren't cold. They were weighing me, measuring how honest I was. Then she nodded once. "What exactly do you need?" she asked quietly. My breath shook with relief. "Just the submission log for my application. Nothing more." Clara sighed, not annoyed, just aware of the risk. She turned to her computer and typed quickly, the screen reflecting off her glasses. After a moment she frowned. "That's odd." My pulse jumped. "What is it?" "Your application shows 2 timestamps," she said. "One for your submission, and one for a modification that wasn't done by you." My stomach twisted. "Who modified it?" She clicked again, slowly, carefully. A name appeared. I felt almost dizzy. Marcus. It wasn't a guess anymore. It wasn't suspicion. It wasn't a feeling deep in my gut. It was documented truth. Clara looked at me with a mix of concern and disbelief. Why would he change your application? I swallowed hard. Because he never wanted a woman to take that seat. She shook her head in disappointment, as if she had seen things but never imagined this from him. I can't print this, she warned. It logs who exports it. But I can show you the screen. And there's a way to record the monitor without turning it into an official file. I frowned. Like taking a video? She nodded. Use your phone. Just keep it low. My hand trembled slightly as I lifted my phone. She turned the screen fully toward me. The evidence glowed in bright letters. His name. The modified timestamp. The altered field showing incomplete qualifications. He had changed my training hours. He sliced nearly 200 hours off my log time. Hours I had flown. Hours recorded legally. Hours he erased just to make me look unfit. I recorded slowly, steadying my breathing, making sure everything was captured clearly. When I lowered the phone, I whispered, "Thank you. Truly." She whispered back, "Be careful. You're dealing with someone who believes he's untouchable." And she was right. The unexpected witness. As I walked down the hallway toward the cafeteria, trying to process everything, I felt someone fall into step beside me. It was Judy, the same older flight attendant who offered help the previous day. She looked at me knowingly. "You've got that look," she said softly. "The look of someone who just learned something heavy." I hesitated. I didn't want to pull her into anything dangerous. Just got clarity. She nodded but didn't push. Instead, she told me something I didn't expect. "I overheard Marcus talking a while back," she said. "He didn't use your name, but he talked about keeping a certain candidate in her place. I didn't think much of it then. But seeing you now, he wasn't talking about flying issues. He was talking about control." Her words settled over me like a second layer of confirmation. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. She squeezed my arm gently. "Because I've watched good women get pushed back for years. And you're one of the ones who actually has a chance to change the pattern." I felt a tight swell in my chest, gratitude mixed with grief and anger. The universe was giving me witnesses I never expected. Connecting the dots. By the time I reached my car that afternoon, everything felt sharper. My thoughts, my intentions, my path. I sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. The phone still warm in my pocket. I had video proof of the document changes. I had an eyewitness account of his comments about keeping someone in their place. And I had the subtle hint from Ben that started this entire trail. The picture was coming together. Piece by piece. Quietly. Carefully. I wasn't rushing toward revenge. I wasn't swinging wildly. I wasn't shouting in hallways or demanding he admit anything. I was building something strong. Something he never expected. Something he couldn't deny. A new kind of strength. That night at home again, I placed my phone face up on my table and stared at it. The video clip sat there like a growing heartbeat. Every minute of the day replayed in my mind, and for the first time I didn't feel helpless. I felt prepared. Not fully, but enough to know I wasn't at the mercy of his decisions anymore. I took a deep breath, reached for my notebook and wrote only one sentence. "Tomorrow I gather the last piece." And with that thought I closed the notebook and finally allowed myself to breathe steady and calm. Because this time I wasn't afraid of the storm he had created. This time I was collecting the lightning. And I knew exactly where to strike next. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because of fear anymore, but because my mind kept replaying the moment I wrote that one line in my notebook. "Tomorrow I gather the last piece." It sat in my head like a quiet promise I had made to myself. When the sun finally rose, I felt steady. More steady than I had felt in months. The kind of steady that comes not from confidence but from direction. I took a slow breath, grabbed my uniform and got ready. I didn't rush. I didn't tremble. I just moved with a calm that surprised even me. By the time I stepped outside, the morning air felt cool and honest. It carried none of Marcus's weight, none of his control. The sky looked soft, washed with light blue. One of those peaceful American mornings where everything feels possible if you have enough courage to take the next step. On the drive to the airport, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Clara. "Be careful today." He's in a strange mood. I stared at the words for a moment. Strange mood. That could mean anything with a man like him. But instead of worrying, I typed, "Thank you. And don't worry, I know what I'm doing." I didn't. Not entirely. But I knew I wasn't walking in blind anymore. A shift in the room. When I entered the operations center, something felt different. People weren't exactly whispering, but they were quieter than usual. Their glances were subtle, shifting just enough for me to notice. It didn't take long for me to understand why. Marcus was standing near the dispatch desk, flipping through a stack of papers with irritation etched across his face. His jaw was tight, and the wrinkle between his eyebrows looked deeper than usual. He was irritated about something he couldn't control, and men like him hated that more than anything. For the first time, instead of shrinking under the tension he created, I watched him with a different lens. He wasn't invincible. He wasn't unshakable. He was human. And his downfall was already beginning, quietly, like a hairline crack forming in a thick sheet of glass. When he finally looked up and saw me, his expression didn't soften the way it usually did when he tried to appear neutral. Instead, he narrowed his eyes slightly, like he sensed something had changed in me. He walked toward me, papers in hand. "Victoria," he said with a clipped tone. "A word." I nodded, following him into a small side room usually used for flight briefings. As soon as the door closed, he spoke again. "I heard you were asking questions yesterday." Interesting. He was already tracking me. I kept my voice level. "Questions aren't against company policy." He let out a short, humorless breath. "Depends on what the questions are." I looked him in the eye, calm and direct. "If you're worried about my application, you don't have to be. I'm simply making sure all records are accurate." His jaw tightened again. "There's nothing to check. Everything has been processed." I took a slow breath, steady, cool, not confrontational. "Good. Then neither of us has anything to worry about." He blinked at me. Not dramatically, not with shock, but with the smallest flicker of uncertainty. He expected me to be defensive. Instead, I was composed. That composure rattled him more than anger ever would. He stepped back slightly. "Your flight is at 11:40. Don't be late." I nodded once and walked out before he could say another word. His eyes followed me, but not with power. With suspicion. And suspicion always meant fear wrapped in pride. First flight, first shift in power. My assigned flight that morning was a short one from Denver to Phoenix. Clear skies, easy route, familiar co-pilot. I met Captain Howard, a silver-haired, soft-spoken man in his early 60s, at the gate. He greeted me with a warm smile. "Morning, Victoria. Heard you had a long day yesterday. Word traveled fast around here." I gave a small laugh. "Something like that." "Well," he said, patting the side of his flight bag, "you're flying the first leg today. Let's make it a smooth one." Being asked to fly the first leg, with a captain who trusted my skills fully, felt like a breath of fresh confidence. As we walked toward the jet bridge, Howard leaned closer and whispered, "Don't let the politics shake you. Good pilots rise no matter who tries to clip their wings." The quiet encouragement settled deep in my bones. The moment we took off, everything fell into rhythm. The steady hum of the engines, the soft chatter from the passengers through the cockpit door, the scent of jet fuel fading as we climbed. I hadn't realized how much flying calmed me until I was 20,000 feet in the air again. The sky stretched endlessly in front of us, and for that 1 hour I felt untouchable. Not above anyone. Just free. When we landed in Phoenix, Howard glanced at me with a nod. "Flawless," he said. "You handled turbulence better than half the captains I've flown with." I thanked him quietly. Small praise shouldn't have meant so much, but after months of being doubted, every bit of validation felt like oxygen. And that was the beginning. One flight, one compliment, one shift in how others saw me. Marcus's narrative about me, whatever version he tried to spread, was already cracking. Because the truth was simple: pilots talk. Word spreads. Skill speaks louder than office politics. And I flew well. Very well. Second flight, second crack in his control. When we got back to Denver, I discovered my schedule had been changed. Subtly but noticeably. Instead of the 2 short legs I usually had, I was assigned a longer flight and a new co-pilot I rarely worked with. First, I thought it was just routine adjustments. But when I checked the signature on the change, it was his. Marcus had altered my schedule again. Was he trying to trap me in fatigue? Was he trying to push me into making mistakes? Was he trying to overwhelm me until I snapped? I couldn't tell. But instead of panicking, I tightened my grip on my bag and headed to the gate. My new co-pilot, Jason, was in his early 30s, tall, athletic, usually quiet. He nodded when he saw me. "Long day?" he asked. "Longer than usual," I admitted. "Well," he said, "let's make this one easier." There was something kind in his tone. Something grounding. I wasn't used to these small pockets of kindness from colleagues. I had spent so long being undermined that I forgot support could be quiet and simple. The flight itself was steady. Smooth skies for the first hour. But somewhere over New Mexico, we hit a patch of unexpected turbulence. Nothing dangerous, but enough to rattle the passengers. Jason held the controls with me, steady and coordinated. When the turbulence finally eased, he exhaled slowly and turned to me. "Good call on reducing pitch early," he said. "Most pilots wait too long." That small acknowledgement warmed me again. By the time we landed, word had traveled. Someone told someone who told someone else that I handled rough air like a veteran captain. The kind of rumor that worked in my favor for once. Each flight became a silent vote in my favor. Each smooth landing chipped away at his narrative. Each colleague who saw my performance became a witness he never intended to exist. Third crack. Someone finally spoke up. Later that evening, while I was placing my flight bag in my locker, I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Ben, the same younger pilot who'd warned me earlier. He looked around cautiously before speaking. "I don't know what's going on," he said quietly. "But Marcus called a few of us into a meeting this afternoon. He was different." "Different how?" I asked. "Edgy. Snappy. He kept asking if anyone had talked to you. He wanted names." I blinked. He was looking for a leak. Ben continued. "He asked me directly and I didn't answer. But I think he knows someone spoke." A slow realization crept over me. He wasn't hunting for information. He was losing control. And men like him panicked when control slipped. "Thank you for telling me," I said. Ben nodded, sighing heavily. "For what it's worth, people are noticing you're flying. And people are noticing his attitude. That combo doesn't look great for him." The comment lingered in the air as Ben walked away. He was right. His downfall wasn't going to be loud. It would be slow, quiet, and built on the truth he never expected me to gather. Fourth crack. The complaint he didn't expect. Just as I was about to leave for the night, Judy found me again. This time she looked purposeful. "I filed something," she whispered. My breath caught. Filed what? A formal concern. Not a complaint. Just documentation. About the way he talks to people. About comments he made. I stared at her, stunned. "You didn't have to do that." She smiled gently. "Honey, sometimes people need someone older to back them up. And I'm not afraid of him." Her courage felt like a warm hand on my back, steadying me. He didn't know it yet, but his downfall had already begun in places he couldn't see. The last flight of the day. My final leg that night was a simple turnaround flight. Exhaustion tugged at my shoulders. Hunger growled. My eyes felt heavy, but emotionally I was stronger than I had been in months. Halfway through the flight, while passengers slept and the cabin lights glowed softly, Jason glanced at me. "Mind if I ask something personal?" "Depends," I said with a small smile. "Are you okay?" The question was so simple it nearly broke me. I swallowed. "I will be." He nodded. "Good. Because you're one of the strongest pilots we've got." The words were quiet, genuine, and landed deep. Those few hours in the air, smooth, calm, steady, felt like reclaiming something he had spent a year trying to take from me. The moment I realized downfall doesn't happen in one blow. When we landed and everyone dispersed, I sat alone in my car for a while, hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. The night air outside felt colder than usual, but the warmth inside me grew. His downfall wasn't going to be a single explosion. It would be a series of shifts, a collection of truths, pattern he couldn't hide anymore. One flight at a time, one witness at a time, one unexpected act of courage at a time. And tomorrow I would take the step that tied everything together. But tonight I simply let myself breathe, knowing the balance was finally shifting. Not in anger, not in chaos, but in quiet, undeniable truth. The morning sunlight spilled through my bedroom window in gentle strips, brushing across the papers I had laid out the night before. My notebook, the printed screen of Marcus's altered application, Clara's carefully worded notes. It was all there, organized like a puzzle waiting to be completed. I sipped my coffee slowly, feeling the warmth spread through me. Today wasn't just another day. It was the day I reclaimed what had been stolen from me. My reputation, my credibility, and my peace of mind. I dressed carefully in my uniform, every button precise, every crease straight. There was no rush, no panicked energy, only purpose. As I left my apartment, the air smelled crisp, a subtle reminder that the world could feel clean and fair if I allowed it to. I had a plan, a quiet one, built on months of careful observation and documentation. Every step I had taken, the subtle battles, the evidence, the small victories in flight, had led to this morning. The airport looked like it always did, busy, buzzing with pilots, attendants, passengers, but I didn't feel like I was walking into chaos. I felt in control. And for once, that control wasn't dependent on someone else's permission. The meeting that changed everything. Marcus was already in the operations room when I arrived. He glanced up, a faint smirk crossing his face as if he believed the day would be like every other. He didn't see me with the quiet determination I carried today. He didn't see the evidence, the witnesses, the careful web of truth I had spun. I walked past him straight to the operations desk. "Morning, Marcus," I said, my voice calm but firm. He looked at me, eyebrows raised. "Victoria, ready for your briefing?" "Yes," I replied, settling into my chair. I could feel the tension radiating off him like heat from an engine. He didn't like that I hadn't hesitated, that I hadn't allowed him to intimidate me before. Clara entered shortly after, carrying a folder and a small USB drive. She placed them gently on the desk in front of me, giving me a brief, understanding nod. "Everything you need is here," she said softly. I smiled faintly. "Thank you." Marcus watched this exchange with subtle unease. He had been used to being the center of attention, the one controlling the narrative. But today the narrative had shifted. I connected the USB to the operations computer, opening the files meticulously. Every timestamp of altered documents, every note of discrepancies, every comment from witnesses was laid bare. My fingers hovered briefly over the keyboard. Then I clicked open, and the screen displayed proof of what Marcus had tried to hide. He leaned in, curious, a frown beginning to form. "What is this?" he asked. I didn't flinch. "Evidence," I said plainly. "Evidence of the changes you made, of the hours you erased, and of the attempts to prevent me from qualifying for the chief pilot position." His lips thinned. I don't know what you mean." I turned the screen toward him slowly, letting him see his own name next to every alteration. "I think you do," I said quietly. "All these changes are logged, Marcus. Every single one. And I have witnesses who heard your comments about keeping certain candidates in their place. That includes both Ben and Judy." I watched him go pale, a flicker of panic crossing his usually composed features. This was a man who had spent years believing he could manipulate reality with fear. And for the first time that fear was turned back on him. The power of witnesses. Before I presented the information officially, I needed witnesses. Not just the evidence on the screen, but people who had seen him act, who had heard his comments, who could speak with credibility. I turned to Judy first. Her calm, steady presence had been invaluable all along. "Judy, would you support the records if needed?" I asked quietly. She nodded. "Of course, Victoria. I've seen it all and it's wrong. He needs to be held accountable." Next, Ben appeared, a little hesitant but resolute. "I'll confirm what I know," he said. "He tried to intimidate me too, asking if anyone had talked to you." I didn't answer, but I'll support the truth. Even Clara stayed close, her fingers resting lightly on the edge of her desk. "The digital records don't lie," she reminded him quietly, though firm. Together, the combination of factual evidence and credible witnesses formed a force that Marcus could no longer dismiss. His control had always relied on isolation, on silencing anyone who might question him. Now the room was full of people who could validate every claim. Confrontation without chaos. I didn't yell. I didn't make threats. I didn't allow anger to cloud the room. Instead, I spoke calmly, logically, and firmly. Marcus. I began looking directly at him. These changes, these comments, they're not just errors or miscommunications. They're deliberate. They were meant to undermine me, to prevent me from advancing in my career based on gender bias. He opened his mouth, then closed it. The room was quiet, tense. No one spoke. All eyes were on him, but none were afraid. That silence, that undeniable truth, was louder than anything he could say. I continued. I have the official logs, the timestamps, and the witnesses to confirm this. Today, you will see that the position you tried to keep from me is mine by right. Not by favoritism. Not by charm. By skill, dedication, and proven capability. The room felt heavy with anticipation. I could feel the weight of months of subtle battles, the looks of doubt, the whispered skepticism, the endless frustration, lifting, replaced by clarity and justice. Marcus's jaw tightened. He realized fully that he had no power left here. None. And that realization, more than anything else, was his undoing. The announcement. After confirming the evidence and witnesses, the HR manager entered the room. Her expression was calm but firm. Victoria, she said, we've reviewed all materials, logs, and statements. It's clear the chief pilot position must be awarded fairly. Effective immediately, you are confirmed as chief pilot. A quiet cheer rippled through the room. Not loud, not excessive, but heartfelt. Colleagues smiled, some whispered congratulations, and even Jason, my co-pilot from earlier flights, gave me a thumbs up. I felt a surge of relief, pride, and validation. Every long hour in the air, every subtle observation, every calculated step to gather proof had led to this moment. It wasn't just about a title. It was about integrity, fairness, and reclaiming what had been denied. Marcus stood frozen. No words came. His smirk, his usual aura of superiority, had vanished completely. Today, the man who tried to control everything realized that control could not exist where truth and persistence resided. A moment of reflection. Later, in the quiet of the hangar after the announcement, I sat in my car for a while, letting the day sink in. The sky was painted with the soft orange and pink of a fading sunset, calm and beautiful, untouched by human quarrels. I thought of everything I had lost temporarily. Hours erased, doubts planted, confidence questioned, but I also thought of what I had gained. My dignity, my professional standing, and the unshakable knowledge that courage and patience could overturn injustice. I allowed myself a small smile. The path hadn't been easy. Each flight, each observation, each subtle act of courage had built toward this day. And now at last I felt whole. Even Marcus in his quiet defeat taught me something. That people who try to steal your power often fear being seen. And once the truth is visible, even the strongest delusion crumbles. Acknowledgement and gratitude. I made my way back inside the operations building to thank the people who had helped me. Clara, Judy, Ben, Jason, and even a few others who had quietly supported me. Clara smiled as I approached. You did it, she said simply. I couldn't have without you, I admitted. Judy hugged me lightly. You deserved it. Don't ever forget that. Ben shook my hand firmly. You taught me something today. That standing for what's right matters, no matter how small the first step seems. Every acknowledgement, every thank you felt like a seal on the victory. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving him wrong. It was about reclaiming what was mine, fairly and justly, and inspiring others to stand for themselves too. Flight home. A personal victory. That evening, I took a short flight to clear my mind. Alone in the cockpit, I felt the familiar hum of the engines, the soft vibration under my hands, and the endless sky stretching in front of me. This flight wasn't about proving skill to anyone else. It was about savoring the journey, the moments of preparation, observation, patience, and courage that led to this point. Every turn, every adjustment, every smooth landing carried meaning far beyond the technical. It was proof that perseverance, integrity, and quiet courage could overcome deliberate sabotage. I looked down at the landscape below. Cities, rivers, roads, lights flickering in the distance. It was ordinary, yet extraordinary to me now. My life, my career, and my dignity had been almost stolen, but I had reclaimed everything, not by fighting blindly, but by moving deliberately, one step at a time. And as the plane touched down softly on the runway, I exhaled slowly, smiling. Today wasn't just a victory over Marcus. Today was the day I finally took back everything he tried to steal. Closing thoughts. That night, back in my apartment, I sat at my small desk and reflected on the journey. From the first insult, the first doubting glance, the first altered document, to the subtle victories in each flight, the cumulative effect had led me to this moment. I wrote in my notebook, "Power is not taken. It is built quietly with courage, patience, and truth. And no one can steal what you have earned with integrity." I placed my pen down, looking at the skyline through the window. The city lights blinked softly, ordinary and calm. But inside me I felt extraordinary. Today I was not just a pilot. I was a chief pilot. I was a woman who refused to be underestimated. I was someone who reclaimed her life, her career, and her dignity, one carefully chosen step, one piece of evidence, one flight at a time. And I knew deep in my heart that this was only the beginning of a career lived on my own terms, with respect, honesty, and courage guiding every decision I would ever make.